Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm McKenna Sturgeon. I am CML's Training and Marketing Specialist. We are joined here today with Geraldine and Catherine from CHFA, and they're going to be helping us go through their Colorado Affordable Housing Developers Guide. We're really excited to have them both here. So just a heads up, this webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you in a follow-up email with a link to the recording, as well as the presentation materials and other links that you might need. So just know that as we're going through, if we're going a little bit fast, you will have access to this information afterward. With that, Geraldine, I'll kick it over to you to get us started. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, McKenna, and thanks to CML for inviting us to speak to your membership. I am Geraldine Francis. I am the Marketing and Community Relations Director from CHFA, and I'm going to allow my co-presenter to introduce herself while I pull up my PowerPoint.
Yeah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Catherine Grosskopf, Manager of the Housing Tax Credit Program on behalf of CHFA, and I'm happy to be here. Geraldine and I will be co-presenting back and forth. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Again, we are here today to talk about our new Colorado Affordable Housing Developers Guide. This guide, excuse me for a second, just wanting to look at my PowerPoint and not at me. This guide is the product of significant outreach and engagement that CHFA undertook to better understand different needs that our community partners were facing. And so we hope that this guide is a resource and responsive to some of the needs that we heard from community about just wanting to get a better grasp and a better understanding about how to bring affordable housing to different communities all across the state. So we really hope that this serves as a resource for all of those community leaders, community members who have a vision and a commitment for affordable housing and increasing that in the communities that they serve. We tried to structure the guide to be both comprehensive, but also not overwhelming. And so we'll show you as we start to navigate here different resources that are contained throughout the guide that you can use to explore the many different facets of affordable housing development. As some of you may know, CHFA has undertaken a comprehensive effort to bring more technical assistance on affordable housing development across the state. This developer's guide is one piece of that. It complements our community relationship manager platform that we've launched over the past few years, as well as our small scale affordable housing technical assistance program and grant funding that we have also launched. And then just a little bit more about the guide itself. It can be used to help to support communities, organizations that are looking to pursue either for sale or rental housing, although I will say that the bulk of the content probably is more focused on rental than for sale development, although there are some tips and tricks and resources that can be used for either. All right, so when we were working on this guide, we really wanted to be thoughtful about different ways that the guide can be used. So first of all, what we're going to show you today is the website version of the guide, which has a lot of interactivity, but there's also a PDF version that you can just download. And by using the PDF and the website version together, you can really leverage this resource in your own individual work, just to become more knowledgeable as a professional about affordable housing development, to grow your own skills. You can also use it through a small team environment. If you want to just hone in on certain aspects of the affordable housing development process with a small group, certainly can do that. It also is intended to be served as a resource working with community at large. We know lots of times community engagement is a really important part of the process. We have a chapter that focuses on that. We're going to talk about that more with you today. And there are some assessments and tools that can certainly be used in some of those larger scale community environments. So what is in our guide? Well, we really designed it to try to be an A to Z of affordable housing development. And we wanted it to be user-friendly for folks who come to the affordable housing space with different backgrounds and different levels of expertise in the affordable housing context. So we start at the very beginning of what is affordable housing. That is always the fundamental question, right? Is what exactly are we speaking of when we talk about affordable housing? And then move through the different steps in the affordable housing process to assist organizations and communities as they might want to bring affordable housing to their neighborhoods. So thinking about what are roles and responsibilities of a development team, how to conduct community engagement, what are some of the pre-development activities to plan for and undertake, market feasibility, financial feasibility through construction, all the way through operations and compliance. Again, every step along the process. As you'll see as we start going through the guide, it's not just the content, but there are also appendices and tools and templates, sample documents that you can either download or that you can use online to help you work, again, either independently, in small group, or in a community forum as you navigate through each of the sections. I also want to call out that there are some key themes that we really wanted to highlight throughout the guide. Things that we know are top of mind and very important in today's environment. So first, definitely guidance on how to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion when you are pursuing affordable housing development, how to increase disaster resiliency of buildings, and then also incorporating green building and sustainability within your affordable housing development. Okay, so let's together dive right in. Again, the guide is available online. You see right here on my PowerPoint, if you want to follow along on your smartphone or your tablet, the guide is designed to be responsive. So you don't need to just view it on a laptop or a desktop screen. It will respond and be usable on a smartphone or an iPad if you're out in the field. So if you want to follow along, there is the web link to the guide. I'm going to actually go to the website version myself, and I'm going to show you how we navigate through the guide. Okay, so McKenna, I just want to validate with you that now you all can see the website of the Colorado Affordable Housing Developers Guide. Is that what you're seeing? Perfect. All right. So we are here in the website version, and I just want to show you some basic navigation of the guide. So first of all, there are two ways to navigate through the guide. You can see the main menu here on the right side. All of these chapters are linkable. So if you click on one, it'll take you right to that section of the guide. You can also use these arrows to open up a chapter, and it'll show you more about what content is contained in each section. If you scroll down using either your down arrow or this gray bar on the side, you can go all through the content. Another way to navigate is this next page, previous page. So by using these features, it's really just like moving through an online book or an e-reader. You move from page to page. And again, you can go forward or backward depending on how you want to navigate the content and where you'd like to spend your time. So I want to just show you a few other features so that as you're moving through the guide, you can make sure that you're getting the full benefit of all the content and resources created. So you'll see throughout that different words and phrases might be underlined. These are phrases and words that we commonly interact in the affordable housing space. And again, to try and make this user-friendly to anyone, depending on where their expertise may be in the space, we wanted to create an interactive glossary. We know affordable housing has its own lingo. It's got a lot of acronyms in it. And so we wanted to kind of make it easy for folks to really get a grasp of that jargon and industry terms that are used. So if you hover over any of the words that are underlined throughout the guide, these pop-ups will appear that give you the definition for that term. And those definitions will be continued throughout the guide. So you don't have to memorize the definition the first time you see it. The word is going to continue to be highlighted throughout, and you can hover over to get that definition. Another feature are these footnotes. So there is so much information to share about affordable housing. Again, we wanted to be comprehensive, but we also wanted to keep it usable. And so rather than build everything in the guide, we built in some additional resources. So these numeric footnotes are a way to go and view additional documentation, often policy briefs, websites, other resources that have relevant information to whatever the content that is being shared at this point in the guide. Okay, so lots of opportunities to always drill in more and go deeper into a particular topic using some of those footnotes. Also, you'll see that throughout we have different kinds of pop-ups. So those pop-ups are often with the square and an arrow out. So here's an example here. If I can get to my pop-up of HUD's income limits. So you'll see I have a square with an arrow. And what that means is that if you click on the underlined phrase, that's going to take you to a totally different website that has more information about what we're talking about right there in the guide. So you can spend time on this other website, get the information you need, just tab back to the guide itself for continuing to use the tool as you need. Now, we're going to show you much more about assessment tools, case studies, and other appendices. But what I want to do now is just get you back to the beginning. If at any time you click on the name of the guide at the top, it takes you right back to the beginning. And that way you can start over or navigate to where you'd like to be. And at this time, I want to invite my colleague, Catherine, to come online, and she's going to start walking you through some of the chapters. So McKenna, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Catherine's going to begin hers.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. So as we get the other screen up, and Catherine, you should be a presenter now, so you should be good to go. I do want to remind folks that you can ask questions in the right panel on your screen. That's where the questions bar is. Please feel free to put those in there, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Catherine, you're good to go. We can see your screen.
Wonderful. So you can see the website screen.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Geraldine, very much. And again, welcome everyone. I'm very excited now to delve into the sort of bulk of the guide, if you will, but not to diminish the later areas, the appendix, the self-assessments, and the tools, because actually they're absolutely critical. But I'm going to spend some time now at a high level going through the 9 different chapters that make up the main menu, as you saw with Geraldine's screen, as you see here, and walking through really kind of what is in each of these 9 chapters at a very high level. We don't have time to go through, but I'd like everyone to have a taste of how the guide really moves anyone using the guide, a developer or other stakeholders, forward through the idea of how to make an affordable housing development go from concept to construction to operations. So beginning with chapter 1, this is, as Geraldine said, really the introduction, where we need to talk about or frame what is affordable housing development and what is affordable housing. Each of the chapters has a learning objective, and it's just really wonderful to focus on that as you begin the chapter. So here, of course, with 1, it's gaining familiarity with affordable housing development process as a whole, and then understanding how you can plan and execute a development. And moving down through the sub-chapters, Again, I'm not going to go through every single one given our time frame today, but I'd like to drill to what is affordable housing. It's a conversation that occurs in different ways across many communities in Colorado and even across our country. But in general, affordability of housing is defined as no more than 30% of a household's gross income. So that's kind of a standard understanding that's explained here and illustrated further in the chapter to really look at 30%, and we have those Hubbers, households gross income. So it would include utilities and be before taxes, of course, and that is the definition used by both the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, CHFA, and our partner agency, the Colorado Division of Housing in DOLA here at the state. So it's an agreed upon definition. If you scroll further down, one thing I wanted to call attention in chapter 1 is that it really means that costs no more than 30% of income for a given income level. So in other words, the question of what is affordable housing is to be asking not is this affordable housing, but rather to whom is this housing affordable? And are they in need of more affordable housing options? So across all of our communities, there is a spectrum of incomes and households. And the guide, if you scroll down, provides a graphic of that spectrum, which really helps begin this conversation of how do I understand my housing continuum in my community? Maybe where do I have a lot of concentration of certain income bands? Where do I have needs? And that really then begins the conversation of how to move forward to address challenges with affordable housing development. So moving next into chapter 2, which really then begins to talk about organizational considerations. So understanding how your organization, the organization of which you're a stakeholder, so it could be a local government or a county government, it could be a nonprofit, it might be a for-profit affordable housing developer. But what is the capacity of your organization, and how can you leverage that capacity to create an action plan toward developing affordable housing? So the chapter here discusses sort of who does affordable housing. Well, there's all of us in many ways do affordable housing. Public sector, of course, for-profit and nonprofit partners. And in many ways, affordable housing gets done through joint ventures. It is such a complicated area of work that it takes many, many partners. So the chapter helps frame organizational capacity and discuss where your strengths are and where you may need to seek partnerships. The chapter goes into building capacity and then creating a development plan, and helps drive those conversations either maybe with a board that you might work with or an executive team to sort of come up with really where are our strengths and where are areas that we might want to seek partnership. Before I move forward, in all of the main menu, there are 4 different case studies that sort of interweave all of these different chapters. And here you'll see that in green. This is a case study on Cactus Corner in Eads, Colorado, in our southwest corner of our state. So those are other areas to click and sort of have a practical example of walking through some of the information in the chapter. Chapter 3 then is moving forward in this process of going from understanding the concept of affordable housing, moving into your own organization, and now thinking through housing development models, your team, and the roles that you may need to develop. So it's focusing in on a development model and to build a development team that aligns with your capacity and goals. The chapter talks about needs, so understanding the needs of your community, understanding through maybe research that you do at your own organization or using even a housing needs assessment to really frame these ideas. Where do you have strength and weakness in income levels and price points or mismatch in your community? Which populations in your community may have significant housing needs? Maybe related to factors other than income. So there are members in communities who have disabilities, which could require specific housing, age restricted, other focus populations that maybe is not income based 100%. Communities have supply and demand mismatches, housing type, quality of housing, and resilience of housing, location of different housing opportunities across your community, and other external and systemic factors and constraints. So where do you have land availability? Colorado is a mountainous state in many areas, causes challenges in some cases for construction. So the chapter really tries to dig into what need would your organization begin to tackle. So then it moves to creating a development model. So thinking through, is the idea to acquire and rehab an existing building, maybe to newly construct, to focus in on a single family ownership project, or maybe more toward a rental and affordable rental project. And then moving to building your development capacity. So really discussing what do you have already and what do you need to work toward, other partnerships or other skill sets to bring forward. And I want to point everyone in this particular audience with CML toward the bibliography and additional resources that exist at the end of each of these 9 chapters. And if you just click on that downward arrow, along with a lot of those footnotes that Geraldine mentioned, you get these just incredibly robust and rich bibliography that really can provide a lot of tools. And I think in particular for CML, for staff who are working at within communities or within city and county governments, a lot of these can be really interesting. Community land trusts, understanding ADUs. So there's just some really wonderful resources, I think. Moving forward to engaging community, chapter 4. So it's understanding the importance of different community stakeholders to the success of an affordable housing development and thinking through practical tips to engage your community. The chapter does provide an overview of NIMBY, which is an acronym that most people know, but it's not in my backyard. And it's something that we really want to lean into in affordable housing development. We want to create an opportunity for stakeholders to be involved, partly with the idea of not having a NIMBY reaction when affordable housing is coming forward. So it goes into why does engagement matter? So thinking through not only why does it matter, and then how do you engage with different stakeholders? Who are those stakeholders? So this chapter really delves deeply into thinking through that engagement, both maybe as the developer of a project, but maybe as the community surrounding that development. And then it moves into a very strategic way to think through the framework of doing community engagement. So using a model that can be considered, and then even thinking through the level of impact you want or you would like to seek through in community engagement. So really providing some good tools to think forward with community engagement. Next, chapter 5, this begins to get into the weeds or some of the more nuts and bolts of actual project development. So chapter 5 helps us think about pre-development, and it's a very robust chapter. Thinking through all the aspects of pre-development, starting with site selection. What is a good site? Why would a particular developer be in favor of one type of site over another? There's different capacities by your developer partner, and so site selection really can be sort of the fundamental part of that dialogue to begin an affordable housing development. The chapter works through not only geographic and environmental factors that you might want to think through, but site acquisition and assembly, so everything from zoning, privately owned, publicly owned, thinking through partnerships that may come into play as you move in this area of pre-development, design, development, and a review process. So there's risk that becomes involved from a developer's perspective if zoning needs to be changed or variances need to be sought, or maybe the process. And so those are all areas that are discussed and highlighted here, including environmental review. So not only driven by maybe community needs and appropriateness of the site in the context where development might be located, but maybe through federal or other public funding, and environmental review could be required, and it discusses what that is and a little bit of the timing to understand that. And again, that bibliography and resources are very robust in this area of the guide. So really encourage everyone to not leave those out and take a look. Moving forward into market feasibility, chapter 6, we've gone from chapter 3, where we were in chapter one where we're really thinking through our housing needs in our community and our spectrum of housing, to now having really identified a site across the chapters of the guide, thought forward, are we doing an affordable rental development or maybe some other type of proposed affordable housing development? And here, this chapter on market feasibility really discusses what is the right way and what are some strategies to think about a market study. A market study is different from a housing needs assessment. That a housing needs assessment really looks at a community-wide organically across all metrics of housing and mismatches of housing, and a market study delves directly into an assessment of the project at hand. So if it would be a 70-unit tax credit funded affordable housing development sited in a particular area of the community with a particular focused resident population, this chapter would discuss how to think forward of a market study for that proposal. So it looks at what are the overview of them, how to conduct them, and there are some resources that CHFA has on our website. And ultimately, the point of that market study is to help yourself as a developer identify areas where you have strength in your proposal, and also identify areas where you may need to look at shifting to be more successful in the market. So maybe fewer 3 bedrooms and more 2 bedrooms, or vice versa, depending on what are the needs in the community. And ultimately, the market study also concludes with a capture analysis or a capture rate, which is something that funders will look at in terms of a measurement of success of the proposed development. So it's a tool to really help with the next stage, which is looking toward financial feasibility. So looking into chapter 7, again, a very, very critical chapter with a lot of robust information. And here you really have moved forward across all of the different stages heretofore of development, and now you're looking at sources and uses, if you will, or trying to find balance of where you might have gaps. The chapter talks about really understanding sort of the 3 aspects of development: a development budget, what is it going to cost to build, making sure that you have sufficient sources to balance all of your uses, and an operating pro forma so you can understand the long-term operating success. And those are really sort of a 3-legged stool, if you will, to looking at feasibility for a proposed, in this case, rental development. So the chapter moves through understanding all of that and then begins to focus in on gap financing, where to think forward of certainly maybe some permanent lending that could be favorable for development, and then other soft debt or other similar sources, equity, grants, in-kind support, deferred fees, really begins to get into that sources side that becomes so important when we're talking about affordable housing, filling the gap or trying to make feasible those lower rents or those lower purchase price that match up with the outcome you're seeking to provide in your community. The chapter moves into different state agencies in Colorado, so both CHFA, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, the Colorado Division of Housing housed within DOLA, and then other common sources for affordable housing resource. And let's see, also provides an area of small to medium-sized housing and common sources that might be used, common lending sources that might have more favorable lending terms for affordable housing, and even non-conventional funding. And again, that bibliography and resources to support. Now 2 more to go. And often once you have feasibility and success with all the pre-development, of course, now you begin with construction. So this chapter really helps think through key decisions to make to be successful in construction. Construction can be the most risky part of an affordable housing project, managing that time frame, managing costs. So an overview is provided, different tasks management, timeline, thinking through construction finances, construction draws, and then as you pivot toward marketing and lease up of that particular project. Some of the resources here and at the tools when we get there really can be wonderful, because this guide provides some template documents that can be used for selecting GCs and other critical partners. And so that really can become important later during construction. And now last, for Chapter 9, project operations and compliance. So not only have you successfully constructed an affordable housing project and you've successfully leased or sold in some cases, but now you have ongoing, it's certainly in the case of a rental project, operations and compliance. And it really is a key part of long-term success, because affordable housing really is so needed in our state and so many communities that it's not a short-term activity. Often we're thinking forward 30, even 40 years. So the chapter provides an overview of property management tasks, understanding how to financially manage that asset, maintenance considerations, compliance, which is also something that really can be a factor in terms of risk from a developer's perspective, and it can be a cost. So understanding how compliance might factor in either heavy-handed compliance with a lot of work, or in some cases light touch, depending on what is the outcome. And then finally, resident services. The point of affordable housing is to create stability and housing opportunity for community members. And so services can be a big part of that solution, thinking through educational, childcare in some cases, financial lessons, food banks, health and wellness, community involvement. All of these are critical services that can be really important to the long-term success of the residents in your development. So the chapter provides that overview, and again, the bibliography. And I think there, I'm going to turn it back over to Geraldine, who will spend a few minutes on the next areas of the guide.
Thanks, Catherine. And yeah, so McKenna, we're going to switch back, and I'm going to share my screen again.
Wonderful. And can I ask a couple questions while we work on that?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So our first one asks if you are doing or offering anything new to address the missing middle issue. With our Space to Create projects in Ridgeway, the top level of 80% of AMI ended up eliminating a lot of folks that we thought would qualify, teachers especially. I know your A County's AMI is likely higher than most, but we still need to create housing for folks making between 80 and 120 or more.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm not sure if it's applicable to the guide or just to CHFA itself, so I'll answer it both ways. The guide certainly gives you resources to look at whatever your housing needs might be in a community, whether it is more that middle income or lower income, and tools that you can pursue in either case. So it actually, I think, as Catherine was illustrating in the housing needs assessment and market assessment sections, kind of helps communities sort of drill in to make sure that they're really honing in on what is that need for them and further refining it. So you could use this guide for either middle income or your more traditional 60% AMI and below. In terms of CHFA specifically and our programs and services, yes, we have launched what's called a middle income access program. It is a subordinate loan program that is designed to be paired with traditional multifamily lending, often equity investment as well, to help make middle income developments more financially feasible that otherwise wouldn't be. This is a pilot program that we have recently launched. We put 14 million of our own capital into it, and with that 14 million, we're able to leverage over 160 million in development investment. And we are really excited because the developments being supported are in very unique high need areas of the state, such as Steamboat, Gibson, Estes Park, Keystone. So some really high need communities, as well as Denver. Also, great news that the Colorado General Assembly just in this past session approved an additional $25 million to be invested in CHFA's program. So we are thrilled about that legislation passing. It was actually just signed into law by Governor Polis this Monday. So we look forward to continuing that new middle income access program and deploying it, and couldn't agree with you more about the need for more middle income housing to be developed. So thank you for that.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we can continue with the presentation.
All right, sounds good. So Catherine walked you through the primary chapters of the guide and also called out the bibliography, which has additional resources that complement each chapter. And I want to take a minute to just highlight a few more resources that you will find in the web-based version under the appendix or the self-assessments or tools. So first, appendix. At the very start of this presentation, we talked about the glossary. So as you move through the version of the website guide, again, seeing those words that are underlined with the hover, if you wanted to just look at the glossary holistically, you could click on that tab. It takes you straight through all the terms that are defined, certainly a really handy reference point. Also, Catherine talked about building your team and looking for different experts that you might need to bring into your team as you maneuver through the process. And we know that it's always an opportunity to think about, are we asking all the right questions? Do we look at all aspects of what we need to bring on? Well, we've created some resources just to help you get started. These certainly might not cover every area that you need to explore for your individual project, but just to give you some starting points on considerations for bringing on GCs, market study consultants, environmental study consultants. These are all under the contractor selection considerations. Also, I mentioned at the top that green building and sustainability was certainly a theme that you will see throughout the guide, and that is true in the content. And then in addition, under the appendices, you can learn more, certainly links to different green building resources, information about standards and certification programs, all available for you in those appendices. The self-assessments are excellent tools to pull up and use them really as interactive worksheets to help you guide your next steps. We have self-assessments for DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mentioned that at the top, that was a key theme. Also on development capacity. Catherine mentioned this right at the start. One of the first chapters is looking at the strengths and the resources that you have already at the table. We have some self-assessments that will help you evaluate what's present and what might you need to bring in, and how do you do that. So using these assessments to help guide you through that process. And then another assessment on development models. So a fundamental question is always, well, what should we do? What are we going to do for sale? Are we going to do for rent? What area median income? Who are we seeking to serve? This interactive self-assessment can help guide you through some of those key questions. And then certainly last but not least, these additional tools. A couple in particular that I want to point out, the making the case. So we talked about community engagement and how important that is. This tool is a downloadable, customizable tool that will help you make your case as you start to engage with community, with other stakeholders, and think through your next steps, and also seek their input so that you can help refine your concept and make it something that is reflective of community needs and desires. Also, I mentioned at the top that the guide can be downloaded as a PDF. So we have this interactive website, but you can also just download as a PDF and use them side by side. So right here under Tools, clicking on Download the Guide is how you will get to that PDF opportunity. And then coming soon, we have a video training library that we are building out. So we're taking short snippets of the guide and making them into videos that will be available on demand to help folks as they want to drill into a certain chapter or a certain section. So you can look for that to be coming soon to you. And with that, I will pause. And Catherine, do we turn it back over to you now for additional
just a few more on the sources inventory, and I might run through the back of the envelope model.
Great. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
All right, Catherine, you should have that now. Perfect.
Is that the case?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right. Okay, so just really as we are coming into the final parts of this guide, there's two more areas I want to spend a few minutes on because I think they're going to be very helpful to everyone here. And, you know, we've had wonderful feedback on these from others learning about the guide. So the first is a tool called the Funding Sources Inventory. So as I bring that up, it is an inventory of 71 different sources of funding. So it's very comprehensive and will continue to grow as this guide is interactive and will be continuously updated. So right now, 71 different sources that can be sorted by different tiles or different ways of thinking through affordable housing for outcomes or for whom might receive that or for the type of use, if you will. So the way to best use this inventory is to maybe pick one. So if you were thinking about a new construction development in your community, you might select that particular tile and it will drill from the 71 to 44 different sources. And starting with the low-income housing tax credit program and all of the different sources, if you click on the detail box, it helps illustrate a little more information. So it helps you understand, would it be for multifamily, single family, which type of developers, if there is a limitation, any limitation or not to uses for that particular source, some background, maybe if there's specifics around requirements or affordability periods, some information sometimes on maximum request amounts of this resource. And then for each of these, you can then click on Program Overview and it will take you out to the specific website of that source. So in this case, the Housing Tax Credit Program for CHFA. But just giving another example of housing development grant funds, which are administered by a partner agency, as I mentioned, Colorado Division of Housing, provides a description here. We were thinking about a new construction project, if you remember at the top. Details discussing sort of how some of the parameters of that, and then again, clicking here, you can go straight to the area where you can find more information and resources to be put in contact with staff for that particular source. So that that is a kind of high-level overview of the funding sources inventory, which is really a great tool. You can take off particular check marks and go across different ways to sort through. The one thing I would suggest is to not overly narrow, because we know that affordable housing is really often about partnerships, relationships, creativity. And so doing too many clicks narrows it too much where you might miss something that's really fundamental to learn a resource. And then finally, another great tool is here in the sample documents and templates. No, I think I had it wrong, excuse me. I meant to say financial modeling tool. So Geraldine already did that previous section. So here are two tools for basically thinking of how to do basic pro forma work. The first one is the back of the envelope calculation. So we made a title of just what this is, a very simple resource, and then a little bit more of a detailed financial model. So it's both of these are downloadable and plug and play essentially. So I just have an example here of the back of the envelope tool, 4 simple tabs in an Excel spreadsheet, a little bit about how it is, definition of terms, so it can be very easily understood. And in this case, I populated a new construction example just to sort of illustrate how this can be really helpful. So you can put in your unit types. So here we have 70 units, 1 and 2 bedrooms, with different affordability targeting of different area median incomes, and kind of a sense of the rents that might be expected in our community. So on the right-hand side, then you see uses, 70 units. This spreadsheet just calculates very simply the potential gross rent, some other green variables that you can populate and play with. Maybe if there's any other revenue source like laundry or other fees that might be obtained, a little bit of vacancy for unit turn, operating expenses that could be expected per year. And on the right-hand side then are all of these assumptions automatically calculating. So in this case, a net operating income in my example of about $380,000. Moving here, what does it cost us to build? So some assumptions that can be played with. What might be our land costs? What might be our hard costs per unit? A percentage soft cost to think about. And again, it calculates how that adds up to be in a total development cost. So here about a $20 million development, and it does it on a per unit as well. Then looking towards sources. So this particular development or this particular model really helps you think what would be the assumptions for lending. So knowing my operating income, what kind of lending might I back into or command? So about $500 million based on different assumptions. And then it helps us understand how do we begin to fill gaps with some of those other resources earlier illustrated in the guide, the Chapter 7 financial feasibility in particular. So here, if my net operating income with those reduced rents could lead to loan proceeds of $5 million, I know I have about 15 million in other resource I need to gain. So it looks at what other ideas might you look toward. In this case, some equity, different grants, maybe some owner equity and other sources, so that you get to that key number of 0. So your sources and uses are in balance. So this back of the envelope calculation just is a wonderful tool for basic assumption modeling so that it can really lead to constructive conversations about feasibility for your affordable housing development proposal. So with that, Geraldine, I'm going to conclude, and I think we could finalize and then be ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, that was a whirlwind of information. I know that we shared. We went through the guide really quickly, but again, we welcome you all to jump on the website to explore at your own pace, to share it with your colleagues, community partners, and to use the interactive resources created. And we welcome your feedback on how it's working for you, or not, or if you see something that you think would be missing or should be reconsidered. We certainly welcome all those thoughts. We know that affordable housing is certainly a complex and a dynamic undertaking, and so we hope this guide provides a resource for you as you embark on those endeavors. And as Catherine said, we welcome any questions from you today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your time. We really appreciate it and going through all of this. We did get one pretty specific question I'm hoping you might be able to help out with.
Sure.
Can you show us where the templates for selecting a general contractor are?
Oh, sure. Catherine, is Catherine still the presenter?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let me reshare my screen.
Thank you.
So it should be working now, yes?
Yep, we're good to go.
Perfect. So in the appendix section, so remember, you can always click up at the header on your mobile phone, tablet, or computer, top of the guide, because it really is designed to be much more of a web-based interactive guide than a paper guide, although it is downloadable. The 9 chapters show at the top, but then these blue bars create differences between our appendixes, our self-assessments, and our tools. So in the appendix is the second one down, contractor selection considerations. And as I click on that, there are lots of things to think about as you consider different considerations. And then, of course, moving into the lower one, sample documents and templates, which actually provides, if you will, blank or sort of sample RFPs or templates that you might use. And those can be just really helpful. It's meant to sort of be a why invent the wheel again and provide that information at your fingertips. Hopefully that answered the question.
Perfect. Yes, I think it does. I will give just a few more minutes for folks to send questions in that they might have. And while we do so, I can go ahead and wrap up just in case there aren't any more questions. Again, this webinar is being recorded, so I will send around a link to both the recording and the presentation materials and the guide itself. Geraldine, Catherine, thank you so much for being here and for your time. This was really helpful. This is a wonderful resource. I've definitely poked around and have learned a lot myself, so thank you for doing that. Do you have any final thoughts before we log off for the day?
I think I'll just share a couple upcoming webinars that CHFA is offering related to the guide. We have a webinar on July 6th that will walk through some of the specific case studies featured in the guide. So you'll get a chance to hear from the project developers and sponsors who worked on the case studies featured and share some of the successes and obstacles that they faced. We all know we learn from each other, so that's another opportunity to do that. And then we have another webinar scheduled for August 17th, where we will talk more about CHFA's small scale affordable housing technical assistance program and grant offerings. So that's where we pair up small scale developers with pro bono affordable housing consulting to help them kind of make their path forward as they navigate their affordable housing vision. So if you'd like to learn more about that, join us on August 17th. All these webinars are featured on CHFA's website, or you're certainly welcome to email Catherine or I. We'll be CC'd on the communication with the slides that goes out after, and we can help get you registered for those webinars. So thank you again, McKenna, and all of you who joined us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.